welcome to another episode of Let's Talk with Greg. And it's me this week. Yeah, so it's just going to be me this week, and Thomas is out. So today we are going to be having our guest, Alex Grunenfelder, on. He is running for mayor, and he's a young progressive. So I'm really excited to have him on. And we are going to talk about their campaign, and we're also going to talk about the unhoused problem in LA. So let's go ahead and get started. All right, everyone, and our guest is the wonderful Alex, and I'm super sorry if I mispronounce your last name, okay? Grunenfelder?
Grunenfelder, but hello, great to be here.
Yay, okay, I'm so sorry. But yeah, please, welcome on. You are running for mayor of LA, and you're a young progressive. So we'll first talk about your campaign, and then we'll move on to our topic. But yeah, tell us everything about yourself and what you're currently working on your campaign, and yeah.
Yeah, so my name is Alex Grunenfelder. I'm an Echo Park neighborhood councilman, a community organizer, and the most progressive candidate running for mayor of Los Angeles in the 2022 election. We've been in this race since April. We're a fully small dollar grassroots campaign, and everything that we're doing is from the lessons that I've learned working on a number of state, local, and federal progressive campaigns. I think that we as a movement, as the progressive movement, have made great strides here in Los Angeles and nationwide. There's still so much more work to do. That's why we're the only campaign that has laid out actionable, comprehensive plans to end homelessness, to reimagine public safety, to end corporate welfare, and stop the harms of institutions like the Olympics. You know, as I said, we're a 100% small dollar campaign. So what we're going to be doing is we're not going to be taking police union money. We're not going to be taking oil money. We're not going to be taking the other special interests and corporate PACs that have been corrupting our politics for too long. And everything that we do is 100% grassroots. So that's not only how we're running our campaign, but that's really key to our values. And, you know, I've been involved in LA city politics and city advocacy for a while. I am the youngest person to ever run for mayor of Los Angeles. I'm, class of 2021 college student, but the time is now to make these changes and to get these things done. And I'm really glad to be here to share more about our campaign with you.
That's great. Well, I'm so glad to have you on. So before we get started, I want to give a shout out to my hometown, Baldwin Park, California. They were able to, with the help of a progressive mayor, a Green Party mayor, his name is Emmanuel Estrada. He just opened a tiny home village. And I want to go ahead and show the audience that, and then we can start our discussion on the unhoused problem in LA. So I'm gonna go ahead and share that with you.
Tiny home village in Baldwin Park is opening its doors just in time for the holiday for Thanksgiving. Taylor Torregano met one man moving in and hoping to get back on his feet.
Joe Quijas has been living in his truck for more than 8 years, but today he finally has a place to call home. I'm Taylor Torregano in Baldwin Park with the first tiny home village in San Gabriel Valley that opened just in time for the holidays.
I have to give me a sign that says home sweet home.
If the eyes are the windows to his soul, Joe Quijas is full to the brim with gratitude. He's overcome by emotion as he moves into the first place he's called his own in nearly a decade.
I finally got a break here. I was a long time without anywhere to live, and so I just thank God that my turn came up.
The Baldwin Park native says he submitted application after application for housing assistance, but was never selected, and no longer physically able to drive trucks or work in construction that once paid the rent for him and his 3 kids.
I got old. And at work, I had my hammer on one side, and then I turned it around, I had the apron on the other side.
A single father that put his all into raising 3 boys who are now adults with their own families that Joe says he just can't can't bring himself to intrude upon. But it left him with nowhere to turn, spending his nights in his truck and his days volunteering at the senior center until a woman there recommended he try his luck one more time. The city of Baldwin Park was opening Esperanza Villa with these 25 tiny homes this week. It's the brainchild of Mayor Emmanuel Estrada, who says seeing how quickly it all came together was surreal.
Because I understand how susceptible we are, and there's no better year to understand that than a year after a pandemic where we were kind of forced to realize that there are a lot of external factors that play a role in our lives.
Before becoming Baldwin Park's youngest mayor just last year, Estrada spent most of his time helping the homeless in Skid Row. He started working with numerous organizations to assist the estimated 500 unhoused in his own city and came up with this village. Tiny heated homes with AC, showers, laundry, 3 meals, job training, and even mental health services. The idea is to set these residents up to become self-sufficient with their own permanent housing within 3 months. It's an opportunity Joe calls God-given as he reads the one thing he did have to keep him going.
It seems to help me solve any problems that I have.
And though it's no fancy turkey or stuffing, Joe says he has so much to be grateful for this Thanksgiving as he eats his tuna salad sandwich for lunch.
What more can a person have?
Full, grateful, and already thinking of ways he can pass it forward.
All right. So, Alex, I want to go ahead and ask, what were your thoughts on that? And then I know there are already some tiny home villages. I believe there's some in North Hollywood, but what is your take on this, and maybe how we can even get this on a large scale?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, that's really the kind of story I think we all want to be seeing more of. It's heartwarming as much as it is sad that people have had to go through these problems for so long. You know, I've talked to a lot of unhoused people as part of this campaign, and I think one of the things that's often missing in how we do homelessness policy in the city of Los Angeles and nationwide is that unhoused folks aren't involved in the conversation. And I think hearing these stories directly really provides a lot of perspective. In terms of the tiny homes, there is a new tiny home village right here in my backyard in Echo Park, hosted by an organization called Urban Alchemy. We, the members of the Echo Park Neighborhood Council, have not yet gotten to take a tour yet. It's very recent, but really hoping to get to see it soon. I was in the Valley a number of months ago and toured the recently opened Hope of the Valley facility out there right after it had just finished construction. It's a great facility. But I think also what that Spectrum News clip touches on is the fact that it in itself is not going to be enough for everyone. And it's going to take services, it's going to take rehabilitation, it's going to take healthcare. And it's going to take, for a lot of people, especially older folks who can't work anymore, it's going to take getting them into that permanent housing afterwards. And this is why, you know, we are the campaign with a comprehensive plan to end homelessness. And what we talk about, and this is paraphrasing the words of a great professor who studies this at USC, it's really a three-pronged approach. It's the folks who just need housing. It's the folks that just need to get their addiction back in check. And it's the folks who need mental health care and treatment. And there are a lot of people who span what's called the trimorbidity there of having all of those issues. And so it's really a comprehensive problem we need to solve. We need to start by getting folks off the streets. And to do that, that really is going to mean making sure we have facilities to bring people to, and making sure as quickly as possible, not keeping people in shelters for months or years the way they're doing in cities like New York, and which has been failing. We need to get people into shelters and move them as quickly as possible to facilities like tiny home facilities, and then assess and figure out where do we go from there? Because for some people, it's going to be a hotel room. For other people, it's going to be get them into rehab, get them into treatment for their mental illnesses. And for other people, it's going to be, how do we get you to be able to get permanent housing? Because I think there's been a lot of discussion, especially here in Los Angeles, about a specific encampment near the VA in Westwood. And we're talking about a lot of the time folks that are struggling with addiction and mental illness, but even those who aren't, folks who are disabled who came home from fighting for our country and don't have anywhere to spend the night. And when I hear some of my opponents talk about this idea of, well, we're not going to provide permanent housing, people are going to have to earn the permanent housing part, I think, well, what happens to the veterans and the disabled people and the people who don't have that option? So again, it is a very complicated problem, and we need comprehensive solutions. And we're hoping we'll be able to make more of these happy stories happen, to get the tens of thousands of people on our streets off the streets, and to do it in a comprehensive way.
Yeah, and so I wanted to ask if you can explain in detail what your plan is once you're in office, and what your administration could do to combat this problem.
Absolutely. So on our website, we have in detail, it's called the MOVE plan that we've been trying to promote. It's really a system of trying to mobilize resources to optimize what we have, to implement a vacancy tax, and then to expand that system citywide and to work with cities throughout Southern California and California as a whole to make this possible. So first and foremost, what we're going to do is we're going to provide safe camping areas. This is sometimes a controversial plan, but it's really an actionable plan. We have people like Councilmember Mike Bonin here in Los Angeles who have already been championing this. It starts with a basic premise, which is, if people are going to be sleeping outside right now, which is what's happening, we should at least provide them a place where they can do it securely right now, where they can do it with access to clean running water, to showers, to these different things. That's not something that we want to last a long time, though. We want to, as soon as possible, get people out of those safe camping sites. We recognize that it's better than what we have right now, but we want to get them to that transitional housing. That means things like Project Roomkey, continuing and expanding Project Roomkey, and working with the Biden administration to try to secure more federal funding for opening up hotel rooms to the unhoused. Similarly, we want to build more tiny home villages, and we want to build more supportive housing in that way. It's a housing first approach. It says if you don't have a roof over your head, you're not going to be able to tackle your addiction, to tackle your mental illness, to tackle many of these issues, to get physical therapy for your disability. These are things that you can't do if you don't have a roof over your head. So we're going to get a roof over people's heads, and then we're going to have them meet with social workers, with caseworkers, and actually begin to solve those other issues. And then we're going to connect people to what I see as the final stage, which is, where do we go from here? Well, if you are able to work and you want to work, we're going to try to connect you to job training programs. We're going to try to connect you to a good job. And if you can do that, then we're going to try to get you into a property with stabilized rent, with low rent.
Quick question. So when we are finding these people a job, these people who are able to work and want to work,
yes,
and we're trying to secure them job training or job opportunities, are the jobs that we are looking for them at least livable paying jobs?
Absolutely. And what we're going to do is we're really going to not only emphasize how we can get people in living wage jobs, how we can connect people to green jobs and jobs of the future, but jobs that they can sustain, even if they don't remain in rent stabilized properties that the city can help secure for them. We really want to make sure that people can rebuild their life. And there's often this idea of, and I've even touched on it, the older people who are on the streets. When we're talking about, queer youth in their early 20s who got kicked out of their house living on the streets, these are folks who don't even just need a job to pay for them today to get them through. These are people who have a full career ahead of them. And so for a lot of people, it's not just going to be job training. It's how do we get them into educational programs? So again, it's very comprehensive, but that's sort of the final step of getting people into rent stabilized properties, getting people into job training, getting people jobs, getting people back on their feet with education. And then for some people who this doesn't apply to, then we're going to look into fully government funded, supportive, permanent housing. And that is a necessity. And there are people in this race who want to say, well, we're not going to do that part. If you miss that step, there are going to be thousands of people sleeping on the streets. So we need to step in and do that. That's what our city's government is here for. And that is effectively our full comprehensive plan to end homelessness here in Los Angeles.
I love it. I love it. You know, and like you even said before, it may not be a perfect plan, but it is a plan that can get people off the streets, and that's what we want. You know, a tiny home village. You know, obviously it's not an apartment, but it's getting you off the street, and that is something that people need to recognize. Um, I have a story, and it's really why we need to get people off the street because you can't, you know, better yourself or whatever on the street. When my mom had passed away, I was unhoused for 2 weeks. I was sleeping on a person's couch. It wasn't on the street, but it wasn't my home, and I was, you know, going to work. I had just secured a job, and also secured housing, but I couldn't pay for my deposit yet. Now imagine trying to go to work to save money so you can move into another house while being on the street. That's why people are like, oh, well, they're on the street because they did this, this, and this, and they're not bettering themselves. No, they're on the street because they have nowhere else to go. Some people who are homeless are working people. Some people who are homeless are students, are youth. They're not just drug addicts, they're not just old people, they're everyday people too. And people need to understand that. And I'm so glad that your campaign is doing a large scale plan to combat the unhoused problem in LA.
Yeah, we're really proud of that. You know, we know a lot of people who have had these issues of becoming unhoused, and it's things like the way that you can go from sleeping on a friend's couch, which uh, I know I've talked to voters who say, well, that happened to me and I wasn't homeless. And it's like, well, you could have been on the street if other things had continued to exacerbate the problem. You know, and I think about statistics on the fact that the majority, a decent majority of the American population regularly drinks alcohol, as an example. Nothing wrong with that. But it's the ways that if you are put in economic situations that lead to you being on the street, well, how could that alcohol that right now is just a minor drinking thing become a problem? And when people are on the streets, their addictions become worse, their mental health becomes worse. And you can go from being someone who casually drinks and struggles with depression and anxiety to being someone who's suffering from serious mental illness and alcoholism on the street. And there are many politicians who then totally want to write you off, even though these are the kinds of issues that can happen to anyone. And I think we really need to articulate that in our messaging.
Yeah. And also, I want to touch up on like, while we're having your plan happen in action, things also need to be done. Like, for example, healthcare is a human right. That's one thing.
Absolutely.
Because one who's trying to seek mental health services and can't afford it, their mental health is going to get worse and worse and worse and can potentially lead to being unhoused. Another thing is a living wage. You know, you need to be able to afford your place where you're living. You know, people need to understand that the unhoused problem is the lack of healthcare, the lack of a good paying job, the lack of just basic necessities. You know, we're not guaranteed them. And so of course it's going to be a problem. Of course it's going to happen. So I wanted to ask, if elected, would you have a plan to implement maybe a local universal healthcare program and living wage?
Yeah, it's absolutely something we're looking into, especially when it comes to universal health care. I've been involved for a number of years in the fight for Medicare for all at a national level and for healthcare for all at the state level. I think that's something we need to consider. And I think even the folks who like my plan, folks who aren't totally on board with universal health care yet, I say, will you support funding these mental health treatments for the unhoused? That's a very popular proposal. It's getting more popular. But if someone is struggling how are we going to address their mental illness before it gets them to the streets, before it makes it a crisis situation? Psychological care must be covered by universal health care at such a point as we implement a system. I want to be very clear about that. I think that we should have a right in this country to things like therapy, to mental health treatment, and we should make sure we increase the amount of folks who are providing that service in schools. I think we need to increase the number of counselors. I think we need to make sure that school nurses are really universal. You know, I grew up K through 12 going to public school in Los Angeles, and that was not always the case. And when it was very imbalanced, the amount of counselors to students. So I think that's a part of that. And yes, we would consider implementing a universal healthcare system at a local level. I'm also proud to say, and I don't always agree with our city council, I don't always agree with incumbent Mayor Garcetti, but we have implemented a pilot program to give a universal basic income to families in Los Angeles. It's not all families, it's just some families right now, but I'm really anxious to see how that program goes. I've read multiple books on universal basic income. I've talked with experts on it. I think it's a fascinating idea. And I think that really it's something we need to be considering, because we need to make sure that we have people who have health care, people who have a living wage, people who have the ability to cover their rent every month and guarantee their rent isn't increasing dramatically. These are all things we need. And I'll add one more caveat to that healthcare idea, which is I think we need to include addiction care in the way we do healthcare, because again, as I'm saying, I think
it's a disease, and people need to treat it as a disease, and not just as a disease, but as a public health problem.
it's absolutely a public health problem, and I think we recognize as a society that addiction is a public health problem. We recognize mental illness can also become a public health problem. And so one of the things I say on the campaign trail is it's one thing even to get people to sign off on providing mental health care and providing addiction rehabilitation for the unhoused. We also need to make sure that the housed as well here in Los Angeles have access to those services to make sure they don't end up on the streets in the first place.
Yeah, I agree. I also wanted to just touch up on other things that we haven't mentioned about your campaign as well. Like we've covered the unhoused problem, healthcare, making sure people are getting a livable wage, education. So let's touch on that. Do you have any plans for education?
You know, I really think education, the city has struggled during the COVID-19 pandemic. I think we do need to make it an emphasis and increase funds to get lower income kids to be back on track educationally. We've seen that the wealthier students here in Los Angeles, the kids, even not just wealthy kids, kids who have internet access, something that many of us take for granted. We're doing this interview on a Zoom right now. Kids are falling behind, and we really need to make sure that we provide the funding for getting kids back on track. And we need to make sure that we provide things like, as we were talking about mental health care, about counselors. The pandemic and some of the things that happened during the pandemic, the murder of George Floyd as an example, had traumatic effects on many youth, especially youth of color and low income youth. And those are things we need to increase funds for. The mayor here in Los Angeles has less power over education compared to, say, the LAUSD school board, but I'm ready to work with the school board to get these solutions done. And it is up to the mayor to decide much of our budget. And so we need to make sure that the funding is there. We need to stop giving money to build stadiums for billionaires and start giving money to build schools for our low-income youth.
I just realized I was muted for a second. Well, I was just saying, well, that was an awesome take on it. I'm really excited to see your campaign move forward into this election. Please tell our audience how they can help you out, where they can donate, and learn more about you.
Absolutely. So we are on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Mayor Alex LA. That's where you can get the most up-to-date updates. You can also sign up for our email list at mayoralex.com. Our full platform, the things you've been hearing about today that you're interested in, are at mayoralex.com. And before the end of the year, we are going to be releasing comprehensive transit and green city plans as well. So you'll be able to find that there. And you can donate on our website. And every donation counts. The way the city rules work, you can give as little as $5 and you can give as much as $1,500. And we have a matching funds program here in Los Angeles. We are working really hard to qualify for the matching funds program to guarantee that that our campaign has access to more funds, because we are a fully small dollar campaign. So if you are able to donate, if you are in a position to donate, please consider it. Please follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at MayorAlexLA, and check us out at mayoralex.com.
Awesome. Well, Alex, thank you so much, and the best of luck to you in your campaign.
Thank you so much. It was great to be here.
Awesome. You take care. And folks, we will see you next week. Thank you for tuning in. Toodaloo.